Welcome to Conscious Action for Truth, the CAT in Cat Chats. Infections, injections, elections, selections. We shine the light of truth on the confounding web of lies spun by the TV and print media that have kept New Mexico suppressed, oppressed, and depressed. No more. Be inspired by the courageous voices of truth calling New Mexicans to action. I am your host, Mahara. As you probably know, this channel is very much dedicated to truth, liberty, and justice. Three things closest to my heart. And that also includes the Constitution. So I have a guest on today, Kathleen Dudley, who is a warrioress. She is fighting not just for herself, but I believe for all of us, for her constitutional rights. And I'm going to just read something that is written on the New Mexico court's website. It says, the mission of the New Mexico judiciary is to protect the rights and liberties of the people of New Mexico, guaranteed by the Constitution and laws of the state of New Mexico and the United States, to resolve legal disputes fairly and to ensure access to justice for all. Sounds really good. But as we are finding out in New Mexico, that is far, far from the truth, as evidenced, for example, in the case of Couy Griffin in front of Judge Francis Matthew, an egregious violation of his constitutional rights and actually the whole of Otero County's constitutional rights. Also, as seen by the Supreme Court suppressing petitions for grand jury earlier in the year brought by Larry Marker. Those are just two examples. So I have with me Kathleen, who is in the court, and she is in the court sui juris, which is different than pro se. So Kathleen, you want to just explain that really quick and then tell us what it is you're doing?
Sure. What sui juris means is that I stand for myself. I speak for myself, as opposed to pro se, which is part of the maritime law, contract law, which was put together by the Bar Association, which is a private association out of Britain. And so if you claim pro se, you are still a part of Admiralty maritime contract law. So when I claim myself sui juris, then I stand speaking for myself as a sovereign woman, born sovereign on the land, with all my rights inalienable, unalienable, a woman of flesh and blood on the land, with my name spelled in lower and uppercase letters. And I do not subscribe to their jurisdiction. I reject their jurisdiction. So those all define my stance in standing sui juris in the court.
So sui juris, as far as I understand it, is also to do with the original Constitution, because there are two. The Constitution for the United States, and then it was changed to the Constitution of the United States when that British accredited registry, the bar, came in and basically usurped our freedom under God-given rights in the first Constitution. Am I close to the correct there?
Yes, that's close, and and I'm just looking for something here. And it is correct. But one of the things that we must also realize is that no one can take away our rights, and no one
Yeah.
can declare law over us. We are sovereign. Only God is above us. So
Yeah.
we were born free. So even though the Bar Association came in and attempted to impose this, it's only for those that accept it. I do not accept it. I stand free. I stand sovereignly. And so really the acts of Congress that have happened and the Administration Procedures Act in 1946 had a huge impact. And that was when the sovereignty of each state of this country was challenged by an act of traitors in Congress. They passed that act. And over the next 10 years, and Oregon was the last to lose its sovereignty. But over the next 10 years, essentially, the states were corporatized and they lost their sovereign posture. So, but that doesn't mean that we don't stand in our sovereign posture. We assert that, and that is with us as long as we are flesh and blood.
And that's what I love about what you're doing. So you are in the courts right now in Santa Fe, although you don't live in Santa Fe, you're in further north. Can you tell us a little bit about what's happening? Because what I read, it certainly sounded like the judge is completely ignoring your constitutional rights. So what's happening? Tell us.
It's not a surprise. I have been involved in the courts for a while now, since I moved back to New Mexico in 2018. And there's a very flagrant posture that many people seem to want to take, and that is to claim legal rights over our constitutional rights. And that is not acceptable, because again, the legal form of what we know as law is all about statutes and orders and opinions and presumptions and assumptions. And that was all put together by the Bar Association. So what happened to me is I had been living in New Mexico for nearly 25 years. I left for a short period of time and I came back. The entire time that I've lived here, there has been harassment against my former husband and myself. And there were 2 charges and convictions against this person by the state. And there were restraining orders put against this person. Within 10 years, he had another charge and conviction by the state within 10 years. So when I came back, it appears that he had his friend act as proxy to continue the harassment against me. This time I was alone. I came back myself. And so I kept contacting the police to record the harassments. Things like breaking my property, stealing T-posts off of my property, threatening to shoot my dogs, swearing and throwing my tools up in the air that were in wheelbarrows, taking my gate and throwing it up in the air, and just blatant interference with my living, my life, all of this on my property. So I would call the police and the police would come. And on one of the calls in September of last year, the sergeant said, "Why don't you file a restraining order against him?" So I did. I filed a restraining order against him, thinking that it would go the same way as the other restraining orders. But no, because I filed it and the state didn't, it took on a different posture.
Hold on, you mean because you filed it sui juris?
No, I don't. Actually, I still don't even quite understand. I think the state took action the last 2 times against this other neighbor. I didn't ever get involved with filing with the court, but I was just following the direction of this law enforcement officer who said you need to just file a civil restraining order against him. Obviously this isn't going to stop. And the other police officers that came out said, well, he can't bully you. These people just cannot stand a woman who stands up for herself and can't be bullied. And I told them, I said, this is really serious. I might have to buy a gun. And they said, well, please go ahead, buy a gun. I mean, this was coming from the state police. And I was pretty shocked. I thought maybe that would help me get them to act with more aggression against this man. What happened as a result of my filing for a permanent restraining order against this man who'd been harassing me, he had an attorney who counterclaimed against me. And as a result of that, in his counterclaim, claimed that I was a nuisance and that I must be abated. And he also claimed that I was in violation of malicious abuse of process, and claimed that I assaulted this man. Well, the interesting thing, I'm 110 pounds and 5'6", and this is a guy who's, I don't know, I have to look on his record again, 5'10", 180 pounds. He's 15 years my junior, and I think that's
and
a bit
he's spent time in prison, has he not?
Well, part of what happened was this was assigned to a judge, of course, and what through the Mora Sheriff's Office, I was sent to the New Mexico courts, and on the New Mexico courts, I found that the judge had represented this man in a prior criminal trespass case, and this judge didn't admit this, and so ultimately 3 of the judges in Mora County ended up having to recuse themselves because of this grave violation that went on for 4 months, and so then it was assigned to a judge in Santa Fe. But what was very interesting was, as I did more digging, I found out that he had been in prison for 14 years and jail in both Colorado and in New Mexico, but not just in jail because he trespassed, but these were violent crimes, 1st, 2nd, 3rd degree rape. And then when he left Colorado, he was imprisoned for 3 years in New Mexico for aggravated assault against a household member with a lethal weapon. And then when he was released, he moved to my county, to my neighborhood. And that's when the harassment against me initially started, in his drunken state.
So what I'm seeing, and this is something I'm seeing more and more, how the dark side, or the evil ones, whatever you want to call them, they project what they are doing onto their enemy. And it sounds like that's exactly what they're doing to you, what this lawyer is doing, accusing you of you can't even make this stuff up. But the fact that it is actually in front of a judge who, from what I've seen of your documents, is apparently siding with this former felon.
Well, what she's doing is she is violating my constitutionally secured rights to be safe and protected and at peace on my own property. That's a 4th Amendment that is guaranteed in the Constitution. But Mahara, in addition to this, the first judge, prior to recusing himself, put a temporary restraining order against both the respondent and myself. I'm a petitioner because I filed for a petition. And this respondent has violated it 7 times, and neither judge have taken issue over the violations of the temporary restraining orders, which I have filed with the court. And I have videotapes from the police that I have secured and sent to the showing that on tape where he actually admitted to property damage, and then a unrebutted affidavit where he harassed a friend and someone I had hired to work on my property, where he'd harassed him, and they still haven't taken any action to protect me. So again, I'm not taking this personally. What I want to look at, Mahara, is how this kind of behavior, where the courts, where they claim justice through their mission statement, they swear to uphold that by taking an oath, which is the only way they can hold office, and then they support the criminal. And don't we see that everywhere?
Yes, we do, and I think people, if they have their eyes open at all, their ears open at all, they'll see that there is a completely two-tier justice system in America. The justice system is totally broken, and if you go deeper into it with the whole British accredited registry and the bar, the whole thing is completely unlawful from this, from its foundation. So you are caught up in this, and I know not by choice, but I feel that, the reason we're doing this today is because you are representing the people here in this case, and I think we all need to listen up, because even though I'm not presently, and maybe most of you watching are not involved in the courts right now, it's important, because the courts are what are supposed to secure our constitutional right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Right there. So,
right. Our Fifth Amendment.
Yes.
Mahara, I want to go back to something about the British Accreditation Registry. Both, all of the judges that are, or the people that are acting as judges, and the counsels, so the bar attorneys, lack any jurisdiction. They lack jurisdiction in my case, but they lack jurisdiction in anyone's case. And as long as we claim that and challenge that, they have to prove jurisdiction, which they haven't in this case. But most interesting is that they lack jurisdiction in the United States of America because they are foreign agents. Therefore, they have no authority to practice law in the United States of America because they don't carry a license and they're a foreign agent. They are part of the British Accreditation Registry.
So wait a minute, you said they don't carry a license. Any lawyer is going to say, yeah, we do.
Well, they're not licensed
to practice law.
No, they're not licensed by the state. They're licensed by their private club, the Bar Association. It's a private organization. It's not affiliated with the government. They do not have a state license.
Interesting.
You ask them, you ask your bar attorney to show you his license or her license, and they will not be able to show you. If you're an MD, you must have a license. If you are a veterinarian in New Mexico, you must have a license. And those are issued through the state. There are many other professions. I think even an accountant must have a license. I think there are a lot of an electrician
can't practice. They can't practice in other states. Say, a New Mexico lawyer cannot practice in other states unless they get licensed in that state.
They get a license. No, they get a license through the Bar Association of Arizona, or they get a license from the Bar Association in New Mexico. They pay their dues to the specific Bar Association in the specific state. It has nothing
outside the United States government.
Exactly. It's not a state government license, which I think is very important that people become aware of, because they're foreign agents without any jurisdiction in our courts.
That's why they have Esquire after their name, right? Esquire. In England, in old England, Esquire meant you were a lord or you were one of the landed aristocracy that were subject to the king. And that was expressly forbidden in the original Constitution for anyone of that nature to be involved in any form of government.
Yes. And the very important thing, I think, is when we go to court, we must claim our constitutional foundation. And there's a really fine interview, and there's a series of teaching interviews that by Margie and Jack Flynn that are just coming online. But perhaps you could put this one link below, because they help people understand when they go to court the very critical questions they must pose to the judge at the time just prior to beginning the hearing or the trial. And that when you pose those statements, you claim your constitutional posture, and you require the judge to respond in like, which holds them, tethers them to the Constitution. And without that, we really aren't working constitutionally. So as long as we hold them to it, we then have a vehicle to be able to continue speaking our constitutionally guaranteed rights in that process.
So how's it going in the court? How is the judge responding to your claiming your sovereign rights? How's that going?
Well, it's a very good question. So she put 2 orders out and filed 2 orders denying me access to be able to file any more pleadings with the court without any reason for that, just assuming jurisdiction, she said, which means I cannot send in any more pleadings without her and have them filed. I continue to send them, but they don't file them on record anymore. That's a complete violation of due process of law, violation of my constitutionally secured rights, my right to speak and file and have access to the courts. Total 100% denial. She kicked me off one of the Google Meet hearings because I dared speak on my behalf to bring my situation forward on record. So what she did was she just cut me off Google Meet. Again, a complete violation of my constitutionally secured rights to speak. I'm there to speak on my behalf, sui juris. I would say that that their actions are very tyrannical, and so I will be appealing. I mean, I will be taking it to a higher court, because you cannot trump on someone's constitutionally guaranteed rights, particularly when I have the information showing that she did actually swear her oath to uphold the Constitution. And so she's violating my rights right, left, and center. So I guess the most important thing for people to understand here is that we must continue to claim our rights. If we stay silent, that's tacit agreement to accept their contracts, to accept their tyranny, to accept their master-slave system. That's why this is important for all of us. It's a personal attack against me, but this is a big, big picture. And I would like to help others learn how to access their own sovereignty and their own rights in the courts to be able to stand for themselves. And in fact, Mahara, I was thinking that if we could ask people to fill the virtual courtroom on the trial, which is Monday and Tuesday of this week, the 14th and 15th, perhaps that would put some pressure against the judge for her violations, and she might not be quite so careless in trumping our Bill of Rights, our amendments, our birthrights.
That's a great idea, and I hope people respond realizing that this is important. Eyes on are important, just like with the elections that have just happened. It's the eyes on, it's the shining the light onto the darkness. They can't keep operating that way if we're watching them. And
right.
they've been used to doing it in the dark. And with all their little signs and symbols and language and all the stuff they use to confuse us, that it has to end, and it's only going to end when we start shining that light. And one way to do that next week is to get on that Zoom for as long as you can with Kathleen's case and show that judge that she cannot violate not only her own oath, but violate Kathleen's rights, which are all our rights. Because one day it could be you in that position.
Yeah.
So Kathleen, I do thank you so much for your bravery, courage, your willingness and ability to sit with these court documents, because as you know, I look at them and I just, my mind gets completely fried reading this stuff. So kudos.
Well, don't think mine doesn't, but thank you. And it's not just for clarification, it's Google Meet, just so that
I'll
people
put the link below.
That would be great. And thank you very much for helping to expose these really, the thieves and the thugs and the criminality of the system, and supporting all of us who who know to stand up and how to stand up. And even though it's not the easiest thing, it's our responsibility for our children and their children.
Well said. And again, thank you. I know what you've been going through. I know how tough it is. And thank goodness you have your music and your writing to keep some little balance going. So
thank you, Mahara.
Kathleen has a wonderful voice, singing voice.
Thank you.